one of the things that has kept our people in bondage is the deception and the kind of dependency system that has been created by Cameroon. The deception made sure that we didn't know our history, that we believed in Cameroon as, you know, the historical reality that should not be altered. And what Cameroon then did with that deception was to institutionalize it in terms of economic, political, and social structures that made us totally dependent on them. And I think this outing is relevant and for us to be able to explain to our people why this deception is still in place and why there are enablers continuously being recruited, you know, to perpetuate this deception, which is critical for our enslavement. So you are one of our finest brains. You remember I told you are the last historian standing. When Mola passed away, and when Dr. Yombang passed away, I felt really sad. We had some differences, but these were living encyclopedias that, you know, their presence alone was an historical fact which could not be altered. And their passing away leaves us wanting. As I said to you, who is going to bless Ambazonia once we take it over? Who is going to tell? Yes, because the generation we see today are mostly politicians. So who are the godfathers? Who are the statesmen remaining to bless our nation and to emblematize what we stand for, our knowledge of where they are coming from and where they are headed to?
Actually, you see, what you've just described is the nature of all colonial occupiers and oppressors. The very idea which the colonial oppressor cannot stand is that the colonized can assert himself, the colonized people can assert their identity and set their own agenda. And so all colonial powers, all oppressors, whether they be white or black, have always set up and set out to make sure that the colonized people do not know their history, do not stand up for their rights, and do not challenge the oppressive status quo. And in that agenda, always they have enablers. Always. Read the history of any liberation movement on this continent or in Asia. It's exactly the same. And all of them use exactly the same language. It's amazing when you look at this whole thing. The colonial authority always claim that the oppressed is what? They tell you the oppressed are challenging law and order. The oppressed are terrorists, and deal with them as you want. Check out. Everybody talks about Mandela, known that the South African apartheid system characterized him as a terrorist. Everybody knows that. Mugabe was a terrorist. Everybody knows that. The Cuban leader was a terrorist. Mao Zedong was every liberation movement that challenges the colonial oppressor. They're always. And that's the commonality you find amongst all colonial oppressors. The language is exactly the same. The modus operandi is exactly the same. And that modus operandi is always to use force. In the false belief that they have monopoly of force. And when I heard one, I don't know what to describe him, some fellow in over across the Mungo there. Half education is a very bad thing. He parrots. It says the state has the monopoly of force. I'm sure he just looked at some picked that thing somewhere and started parroting it. But actually, what Max Weber did say, that the state has monopoly, legitimate use of force. That word legitimate is very, very critical. But of course, our individual, I suppose he doesn't know what legitimate means. And he doesn't understand the nuance in all of that. So what has always impressed me, even in our own struggle, is to discover that the colonial oppressor aligned himself exactly with all colonial oppressors. And that's why I've been saying that this continent has not completely gotten rid of colonialism. The UN is clear, and the instrument of the African Continental Organization is very clear, that colonialism in all its forms, shape, and manifestation must be eradicated from the continent. And that's the UN agenda as well, must be eradicated. So the fact that you find the white man packed his bags and went away doesn't mean that colonialism ended on this continent. It hasn't. We have a living example in the Ambazonian case. We have a living example in the Richian case. We have a living example in the Western Sahara case. Black on black colonization. Because some neighboring country thinks it has a bigger size, a bigger population, and a presumed military power can turn around and grab the territory next door. History has shown that it doesn't work. It can never happen. Just as South Africa failed to grab Namibia, just as Eritrea, Indonesia failed to grab East Timor, just as Imperial Ethiopia failed to grab Eritrea. These are living examples. Morocco has been strong for the past half century, thinking that it can succeed and grab the Western Sahara. It will never succeed. But more countries that are wise enough, when they see a situation like this, they say, okay, fine. And that's what Indonesia did. So look, what we are doing here is not achievable. And they left. And my advice to the colonial, our own colonial oppressor has always been, please read history. Read history. And you'll find out that you will never succeed in your expansionism in the next 1,000 years. It will never happen. So here we are, facing, we'll be discussing one of the biggest historical frauds that has ever been recorded on this continent. What passes for as 20th May, and the colonial oppressor keeps on trying to ram it down people's throat. That was something that was legally, legitimately, and even politically well done. No, on no count, even on political level. No talk of legally. It was a gigantic fraud, a big swindle